Ladies and gentlemen, we now go live to Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV.
Sorry, that was really well done. All right. A few. How does Reagan talk?
A few months ago, I told
the Dune-ish
people I did not trade
spice
for hostages. My heart and my best intentions still tell me that's true, but the facts and the evidence tell me it is not. As the
Space Guild
reported, what began as a strategic opening to
Arrakis
deteriorated in its implementation into trading
spice
for hostages. This runs counter to my own beliefs, with
Padishah Emperor
policy, and to the original strategy we had in mind. There are reasons why it happened, but no excuses. It was a mistake.
You're tall, but I'm standing in front of you.
It's a podcast.
Welcome to You're Tall, but I'm Standing in Front of You, the podcast where two friends circling the drain of academia examine the cultural detritus of the 20th century. I'm Devin.
I'm Ethan.
And buddy, it's good to be on the other side.
We did it. Yeah.
We finished our 9/11 series. Thank you to everyone who followed us on that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we have finally...
You know, the next one's only 11 months away.
Yep. Nope. Let's get the list. Let's get the list filled out now. But you know, we're finally on the other side, but we have not escaped the clutch of themed months.
Yeah.
So, Ethan, you want to tell the listeners about what we're doing this month?
Well, there is a new film coming out in October. I guess it was technically supposed to come out last year, but then a few things happened and it couldn't. And so Dune, Denis Villeneuve, his take on it. Did I get that right?
I believe it's pronounced entirely differently, but I don't know how. It's like French.
Do not pronounce the S to Denis. It is silent in French. Do not say Denis, but rather Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve.
But it's his take on Dune, the kind of classically unfilmable novel. But that's
Sci-fi
not
novel. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're gonna get to that. The idea is that we were gonna talk about that film when it came out. We're gonna do like a quick release. We're gonna see it the weekend it comes out together, and then we're going to like immediately...
We're gonna contract COVID.
Yep. And then we're gonna talk about it. But it seemed like you can't just have a Dune 2021 episode.
No.
So
yeah,
we wanted to lean into it first.
Yeah, and you're so right, because it's like, you know, this Dune film that's coming out, you know, however good or bad it ends up being, you can't talk about Dune without talking about
Dune.
This, you know, this vexed history it has as a film property, right? Like, you know, it's not just the David Lynch film, which we'll be talking about today, which is like the first big adaptation. It's, you know, the doomed Jodorowsky adaptation, which, you know, led to the more recent documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, which I think we'll touch on at one point. We're not going to talk about the sci-fi miniseries, but there's that as well, right? And I think, this new film that's coming out, what it is very like out in the open claiming to do is like that it's going to exorcise these demons of Dune's like, inability to be made into a blockbuster of the success of like a Star Wars or, a Star Trek, right? Like this sci-fi novel that should be, according to everyone, one of these great epic space opera films, right?
Yeah.
So like that's what this film is very much trying to do, like claiming it's going to do in the trailers, right? So we'll see if it succeeds or not, but we have to first investigate what's happened before.
Yeah. So this is kind of the build up to that, whatever disaster of an episode that will be.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, so like before we get into the film, which because we're going to primarily be talking about the David Lynch adaptation today, we have to talk a little bit about the novel, I think.
Yeah.
Even if just in brief. Oh, and first, I actually want to shout out our friends of the pod at Better Read Than Dead, READ, who some of whom are listeners to the pod. So hi guys. They have a great episode on Dune. They're a literature podcast. They are much more coherent than we are, right? So we're not going to, I think, go too deep into the book. If you want like a full dive into the novel itself, check them out. But Ethan, what was your like background with Dune?
I only ever read Dune for the first time in like 2019. Like that was the first time I read it. Yeah. Because this film was supposed to come out around then.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to see the film without having actually read the book. Now, I did have a previous history with like this David Lynch's version of Dune, the 1984 film. Like I remember watching that in elementary school. Me and my friend Wiley were really into like Dune. I remember we would often do the chaw, like that thing with their weirding device thing they do. That became like a meme for us in the time before memes.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be like a thing we would do. I like as a like just like little kid, I found the universe of Dune to be super interesting because I'm like, oh, there's all these different factions and it's like a huge scale. And so I really appreciated like that aspect of it. I think then eventually I moved on to like Babylon 5 around that time. So it only had a short focus for me as a elementary school kid, but I went back and I read it in 2019, and then I rewatched the David Lynch film with my friend. We like synced it up and watched it at the same time. And I remember the film ending and us being like, you want to say something nice after you spent 2 hours and 15 minutes of time watching it. And I think we'll talk about like there are some redeeming aspects of the film, but it's not the best film.
I think I'm gonna, we'll get into this, and I think I'm actually gonna like this might be the pod where we most disagree about a film. We'll see. Yeah. But I will say, like, your story is that's the like case law version of events, right? That it's understood, Dune is kind of understood as like this great sci-fi novel, one of like the classic entries in the genre, and David Lynch's adaptation is understood as a disaster, financially was a disaster, and we'll get into a lot of that and what it means for his career, right? But just briefly, my relationship to the novel, I read this back in high school, and I've always been someone who is very interested in sci-fi, like is especially interested in like the great works of science fiction, for lack of a better word. I was not exactly like a prolific reader of sci-fi as a kid. I was like mostly reading like, like what would it be at the time were considered like the classic works of like literary fiction, right? But like Dune was one of those sci-fi novels that was like often talked about like in that vein, right? As like not just like a random like dime novel paperback, but like considered like a great novel that like transcends the genre, which I think again we'll get into this, not sure how true that is or not, but I remember reading in high school and loving it, right? Like thinking like, having seen Star Wars, been really into Star Wars as a kid, being like, okay, this is where all the Star Wars stuff comes from, was at least how I interpreted it at the time. The desert imagery I loved, and just really into all the different like political factions, and like it like really scratches that nerd itch in your brain of just like keeping track of different houses and stuff. I think a lot of the same things people got out of like Game of Thrones, right?
Sure.
And but never read the sequels. Always kind of meant to, just never got around to it. And then didn't see the film for a long time, even though, especially when I got to college, I got really into David Lynch, still am really into David Lynch, right? Probably my favorite filmmaker. But had always, heard like, oh, well, that's his worst movie. And so I like didn't really prioritize watching it. And I'm not sure exactly when I did, but I also had on my first watch, like the same reaction you did of just like, oh, this is like just a shitty failure of an adaptation, and it's like the aberration in Lynch's work, right? It like is to be removed from his filmography essentially. So and now it's like I think I've been thinking about David Lynch as a filmmaker for now over 10 years, have seen almost everything he's done multiple times, and was really interesting to revisit this and reconsider it and its legacy, right? Especially since watching it after having seen Jodorowsky's Dune, which, just to briefly allude to, the thesis is basically that, this the filmmaker Jodorowsky, who made Holy Mountain, El Topo, a lot of like these very like experimental films, that he had a planned Dune adaptation that didn't happen, and Lynch's ends up happening instead. And the thesis of that film is that if that film had been made, it would have been like the greatest film of all time, and your nerd brain would have exploded. Yeah. And I'm like skeptical of that thesis, right? But I remember watching that film the first time, that documentary, and buying it. So it's very interesting to revisit David Lynch's Dune after all that stuff, and then on the precipice of this new adaptation that sees itself as righting David Lynch's wrongs in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's almost like when you think about Jodorowsky's Dune, like, it's kind of presented as like, look at all these players that were lined up to like add this and that. But yeah, I sort of feel like also when you think about like what they went on to do, like what like H.R. Geiger going on to do like Alien and things like perhaps better positioned to like go off and do their own thing, as opposed to trying to make this monstrous creation of whatever you think would have happened if they all came together to make Dune instead. Yeah. Probably would have not been great.
Yeah, no, because I mean, just something I want to prep, like while we're just on the book, something I want to just put out there. Again, we don't need to dive into it too deeply, but Dune is not a cinematic book, despite it invites the temptation of being cinematic, because you can picture like, oh, these beautiful desert vistas, these like wide shots we'll get to do, which is something that the Q, the French guy,
Denis Villeneuve,
adaptation is like, at least based on the trailers, is like soaking up the opportunity to give us these big, vistas, which is something he's done before in like Blade Runner 2049. That's something he's very good at, right? But like the novel itself is like incredibly political. It's incredibly invested in like arcane lore and rules and proper nouns, right? It is like, it has an almost like encyclopedic form. And like, it literally like starts with all these epigraphs from different like kind of like imagined texts from the universe of Dune, right? Like the emperor's daughter has written like a number of histories that are like quoted as epigraphs before the chapters.
It ends with 4 appendices.
Yeah.
Also like a list of terminology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like this is not Star Wars. Like Star Wars is like,
no.
Super simplified, hero, villain. You don't need to know you don't need to know if like the empire is structured like a Toyota car manufacturer model, or is it like, is it American like GM style? Are they using flow charts? You don't need to know any of this stuff, right? But Dune, that's like the primary stuff it's about.
Yeah. So do we want to like just briefly go over the plot to Dune?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean it's such a risk to jump into this, but we do, this will be a twofer, presumably, because we're doing 2 versions. So yeah, let's go through it a little bit, just giving the broad strokes for everybody who isn't familiar.
Yeah, and I'll mostly just focus on like the David Lynch adaptation, but I think he follows pretty well with the overall book. But take it as you will. So it's the future. It's the year, like what, 10,191?
Yeah, it's like a hilarious future, right?
Yeah.
Like so far into the future, we're almost back in like an Arthurian legend sort of world or something.
Yeah, it sort of has reverted to this kind of feudal system and sort of a mercantile sort of thing going on as well. We're only 1/4 of the way though to Warhammer 40,000, so that really comes out with it doesn't go quite that.
And those are in a shared universe,
of course, yes. But I think that was something really intentional with Frank Herbert, because he seems like he's more interested in the sort of weird shit of ecology and like. Can we imagine what religion would evolve into over 10,000 more years? I think that really interested him more than telling a story. But anyways, here's the story. It's the distant future. There are these feudal houses that exist. There's an emperor, but he's not, he shares control pretty much with the different houses. But there's also
the Space Guild.
Yeah, and then there's the Space Guild, and the Choam Corporation. Then there's the Bene Gesserits, who are like space witches, essentially.
Yeah, kind of like between nuns and witches.
Yeah, and so there's these different factions. And you have House Atreides, they're kind of the good guys, and Frank Herbert just goes overboard with like, look, they're beautiful, they're so nice, they have a water planet, but they're called in to take over the planet Arrakis, which is also known as Dune, which is currently owned by their rival house, which is the House Harkonnens. So they're like, oh yeah, well, the Emperor wants us to take over the Dune planet, and Dune, that's where the spice comes from. And the spice is like this one commodity that drives everything in this futuristic society. It is like the most valuable commodity.
Yeah.
The guild needs it for their interstellar travel. It's hugely important.
Yeah, the Bene Gesserit need it for for their like kind of magical powers, I believe. And I don't want to underestimate in this summary how much power the Space Guild has, right?
Yeah.
Like, because they are these, especially in the Lynch film, we should say. I actually am not. I don't remember how they're depicted in the novel, but they are like these increasingly deformed beings until like they're the highest ranking one we see in the film is like almost looks like the baby from Eraserhead if it was like 100 times larger and like in like a tank, but like they're ingesting so much of this spice and basically turning themselves into these like kind of inhuman psychic beings, but what they get out of it is this ability to like fold space.
Yeah, that's and I hadn't even thought of how that situation with the guild and the navigators, which are these like deformed creatures because of all the spice that they ingest, how that kind of plays against this other theme of like eugenics that is essentially at play with the Bene Gesserit of like trying to get the perfect human that can you know, see across time and all of this stuff. So that's interesting. But yeah, so there's all these different players, and House Atreides has been called by the Emperor to take over Dune, to take over Arrakis. Of course, you got to know shit is up because, like, it's, you know, there are reasons why this is happening. But, you know, House Atreides, because they are the archetypal, honorable people, Duke Leto, the head of House Atreides, and his son Paul, they decide to, you know, go to Arrakis.
Yeah, and Paul played in this film by Kyle MacLachlan.
Yes.
Who, of course, will go on shortly after this to star in Blue Velvet, and then Twin Peaks.
Yeah, Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks as you know, Agent Dale Cooper.
Yeah.
But this is actually like his earliest appearance.
This is his first one.
A Lynch work.
Yeah, and Lynch was saying, I saw an interview, David Lynch was saying, like, this is the first time he was in front of a camera, was this film.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it's huge. But yeah, so they go off to Arrakis. I don't know, man. Like it's all a ploy, and the Harkonnens
and they know it's a ploy.
Yeah,
like they're not going in ignorant, but it's like this thing where it's like, we have to go because the Emperor told us to, and we know it's probably a trap, but we're just gonna try to not get caught. But but you know, there's a traitor. The doctor who is, you know, they don't suspect him as traitor because he actually literally has like been conditioned to where him being a traitor shouldn't be possible. He has this like diamond mark on his forehead. But nonetheless, he does somehow. Leto dies. Some other people die that it doesn't really matter. We don't need to mention who they are.
Can I say one thing? This comes from reading the book, but I think also through the novel, and maybe it makes more sense the later ones. I never understood why there had to be a character for Duncan, Idaho, and then there also had to be a character for Gurney Halleck. I didn't know why you had to have both of those.
They're kind of the same. I think it's just, again, it's just like world building for Herbert.
I guess. Yeah.
But Duncan, Idaho is so funny because he actually doesn't really serve any function in Dune besides having the greatest name of all time, and then getting killed really early. So I guess he's just there. He's kind of like a high level red shirt in a way. Yeah. Like, and then Gurney Halleck gets to survive, and he's played by Patrick Stewart. They're both kind of like just military-ish guys that work for the Duke. But Duncan, Idaho became this fan favorite, right? And is resurrected in the later novels.
Yep.
I think purely by virtue of his just incredible name.
Yeah. So he does have that going for him. But yeah, so it's a trap. The Atreides all get killed by the Harkonnens, except Paul and Lady Jessica, his mother.
Who's not Duke Leto's wife.
No, she's a concubine. And we'll have to talk about just how this book
is respectful of women.
Yeah, very much so. So they escape, though. They escape from this coup, or, you know, this surprise attack. And they kind of go off into the desert, where they meet up with the Fremen, who are kind of like, they're almost like Bedouin. They have like very strong vibes of like the desert people that
they're like the nomadic people.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the characters are very much racialized in the novel. But then in like Lynch's adaptation, the head of the Fremen is played by Big Ed from Twin Peaks. the like whitest, hokiest man of all time. But they've got all these like vaguely sort of like Islamic orientalized stylings, right? They're a nomadic people. Their language is vaguely like Arabic. The word jihad is literally used frequently. And you know, they're like in touch with the desert and have the capacity to survive in a way that like these outsiders can't understand, right? So we actually haven't escaped 9/11 month in a lot of ways, right? It's like it's kind of this quagmire situation where invading empire can't actually understand the situation on the ground.
Yeah. And I think one of the interesting things about this whole situation is you have Dr. Kynes, who's the planetologist, appointed by the emperor, as was, I think, his father. And this, I think this is like what more interested Frank Herbert than anything else, like the planetology. As you find out, like nobody knows how many Fremen there are. They think there's like not a lot, but there's a shit ton of them. And Kynes has been working behind the scenes, as had his father, to be terraforming the planet in like the far reaches away from where the Empire and the Harkonnens, where they could actually see they were doing it. But there was like, oh, we can actually store up the water, and over time we can change the ecology of the planet to actually support life, plant life, to support rain and water and all this other stuff.
And that's very implicit in the film. That like Kynes is very minimized. He's in there. So. He's played by the great Max von Sydow.
Yep.
Rest in peace.
Yep.
And but basically, like he's there to give us a little bit of exposition about the Fremen and like these suits they wear to save moisture.
But I was just the whole time I was imagining like Frank Herbert's reaction in the first screening when he sees how the ecology stuff has been minimized. Who'd you like, what the fuck is this? That's why I made Dune. I bet he was so angry about how minimized that was.
Yeah, no, film. For sure. And I mean, I will say, like, having read the novel, it's like maybe the like most interesting part of the novel.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's such a politically wrought thing, because like Herbert is this really interesting guy. You don't really have guys like him anymore, where he's like super into ecology and like seeking, very interested in finding like sustainable ways of living with the environment and stuff in a way that's like kind of hippie-ish, right? But he's also like super reactionary at the same time, right? And like, it's more conventional in 2021 to associate like climate politics with the left. But he's very much from a time, he's writing this in the 60s, right? Yeah. Where like, and like the counterculture was not a left-wing movement, right? I mean, there were elements of the counterculture that were left-wing, right? But it was a politically varied movement, and often a super had a lot of right-wing tendencies. And like Herbert is like the super libertarian guy who also, but like is really interested in like planetary processes.
Yeah, I mean Nixon made the EPA, so
yeah.
So it is very interesting, but that gets downplayed in the movie. Anyways, they escape to the desert. It's kind of like a very Lawrence of Arabia situation where Paul Atreides becomes like this provocateur that is it's like an insurgency that he helps run.
He's better at being a Fremen than the Fremen are themselves, right? Like this is indexed at like in one of the only scenes with Kynes when he's explaining the like the moisture suits.
Yeah.
He like turns to Paul and he's shocked and he's like,
"Your suit is fitted desert fashion. Who told you how to do that?"
Which, by the way, like there's no discernible difference. Like there's not, it's like a skin tight suit. There's not like really, the film needed to do something to visually signify he had set it up in some way. Cause like there's nothing besides Max von Sydow insisting to you that he has done this. But Paul's just like,
it seemed the proper way.
He's like, there's all this stuff indicating he's like got these like natural compulsions, this natural knack for living in the desert and thriving.
And as we do many times throughout this film, we get a voiceover of Max von Sydow's inner dialogue where he says,
"He shall know your ways as if born to them."
Like, oh, this guy must be the chosen one.
And there's all these, we should say the Bene Gesserit have like been spreading these kind of prophecies for years about this kind of like Messiah figure that the Fremen know as the Kwisatz Haderach, or however you say it.
That's what the Bene Gesserit call it. I think
Yeah,
it's
but-
Maldeeb for the Fremen.
Yeah, but the Bene Gesserit are like the source of these prophecies.
Yes.
And they essentially have spread them as a means of like kind of like population control. So like if they ever end up on a planet, they can draw on these prophecies to like ingratiate themselves with the local populations. But like Paul seems to be fulfilling these prophecies that are not supposed to be coming true in this way.
Yeah. But so that he leads an insurgency in the book and sort of in the movie. It like it's several years essentially that this takes place. So sort of a montage.
Yeah, it's like the Rocky training montage, times like 1,000. Riding on worms, blowing shit up.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Paul's sister. She's born during this time. She's like this fully formed, like has all the memories of everything as she is born.
Yeah. Played by Alicia Witt.
Yeah.
Child piano prodigy, who goes on to play Donna's sister in Twin Peaks in one episode. And yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, but there's a lot we could get into about like what is going on about Paul kind of taking on this prophetic mantle with the Fremen. But long story short, they rally behind him. He leads a revolt. The Emperor has come to Arrakis along with the Harkonnens to try and get the situation under control because these insurgents keep blowing up all of their spice rigs. And essentially, Paul launches an attack on the Emperor and all of the on the Harkonnens, and
the Harkonnens are all killed.
Yep, and the Emperor has to submit.
The Baron is like this big, fat, grotesque guy with all these boils. He's killed by the sister. Paul defeats like the heir of the Harkonnens, played by Sting, in like this random duel that kind of just happens at the end. Like they forgot to do anything with Sting, and it's like, oh, you guys now like fight one-on-one, and we're all gonna watch.
I think the book maybe builds it up slightly better because in the movie, the only indication you have like what the fuck is going on with this Sting character is like Paul will have visions where it cuts to Sting and Sting will be going like,
I will kill you.
And it's like,
okay. And then the movie seems to be ending and you're like, wait, they forgot about that. And then Sting just walks out and just like, it's time for me to kill you. And then Sting gets killed.
And that is funny, but in the book, I think their battle is in like some of the last pages of the book too. So it is also really quick in the book how that whole thing is resolved. But it's a bit quirky. Yeah. So he defeats the Emperor, and so he's like, now I'm the Emperor. And then it starts to rain. The Fremen like are very confused, like the fuck is going on? It doesn't rain on this planet. We don't know what this is. And that's, I have skipped over so much, but that's just like the overarching, like what happens. Paul becomes the Emperor. He can see into the future. He's all these powers, and he's gonna launch a jihad.
Yeah, and I think like, we should note that like the sort of like the struggles we're having even summarizing this film is also a problem the film is having with itself, right? Because like I will never know, because I've only watched this film after having read the novel, and I've read the novel twice now. So I know too well what's going on to actually get confused. But it seems to me like if you were just watching this film and knew nothing about the book, it would be completely incomprehensible. Because it's just like, to me, it's like I watch it and I'm like, oh, okay, this is the scene where that happens. But it doesn't seem like you narratively have gotten the information to understand it. And this is despite the film being obsessed with exposition, which it does via like voiceovers. It does via like randomly having you as a viewer like hear the thoughts of characters.
One of my favorites is when Lady Jessica is taking the water of life, which is gonna like let her become a what's the word for it?
A reverend mother.
It's gonna let her become a reverend mother. But it also like fucks up because she is pregnant with Aaliyah, her daughter. But like Paul is watching this, and there's just this voiceover that goes, "One day I will have to do this." It's lost it. It's like, okay, I get it. Anyhow, yeah, there's a lot of that throughout this film, but I'll be curious how they do it in the new version. It's hard to cover all of this exposition otherwise.
My name is a killing word.
So I think part of why the plot of Dune is such a mess is that, unlike a film like Star Wars that is ultimately trying to tell just like a very classic hero tale, like a mythologically simple one almost. Dune is really, the plot of Dune is like this like poorly wrapped package enabling Frank Herbert and then like David Lynch via Frank Herbert to ship out their weird ideas about a number of topics, right? Like, and I think chief among those is their ideas about gender.
Yeah, there is a lot to unpack with gender in this story. I think one of the first off, I think like broadly the way female characters exist in this, both the novel and the film, has issues. So Lady Jessica, that's Duke Leto's concubine. They make note of how she didn't actually marry Duke Leto because he wants to be open if he wanted to like marry another house for.
They've been talking about seeing some other people, spicing things up, maybe get like a throuple situation. But
he wants to keep things open for some alliances. But then you also have what's her name? Chani,
yeah, played by Sean Young, who is what is her name? The replicant love interest from Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Which I never realized until this watch through, because this film's actually after Blade Runner, but she looks so much younger in this. I think because like her Blade Runner character is styled in such a like faux 1950s sort of like, or even like Victorian way. It's just like kind of defamiliarizing to see her as like a Fremen with she has like the weird CGI blue eyes. But yeah, Chani is like Paul's love interest.
Yeah, and he sees visions of her early on, because the whole thing is like he has this weirding way, or not the weirding way, but he has like the sense of he can sort of see some of the future, but he refines that over time. But he can he's seen her in his memories. And I think when he first sees her in the movie, he's like, she's beautiful. Something like that. I think it was another voiceover dialogue. So she is like his love interest, but again, Paul also isn't gonna marry her because it's so funny, because Princess Aurelian is sort of like the chronicler of this whole thing. Yeah, so it's like There and Back Again, which is like The Hobbit, written by Bilbo Baggins. So there's like this kind of, the characters from the story are also sort of like the authors of the stories about the book. And Princess Aurelian very early on is like introduced as kind of like, she wrote the history of Paul Muad'Dib and all of this. And she ends up being like, she's the princess, she's the daughter of the emperor. And Paul marries her at the end to like become emperor essentially, but he's like, I'm never gonna fuck you. So I love that. Can I just read the last two paragraphs of Dune, the novel?
Yeah, and I just want to preface these with like, keep this in mind when you, the like sci-fi nerd, are getting all upset over what David Lynch did to your precious, like, perfect novel.
Frank Herbert is thinking in like 1962, how do I end this 800-page novel? And this is what he comes up with. Paul has defeated the Emperor. He's sorting out all the logistics, and here's what it says. Paul stared down into her, Chani, into her eyes, remembering her suddenly as she had stood once with little Leto in her arms, their child now dead in this violence. I swear to you now, he whispered, that you'll need no title. That woman over there will be my wife, and you but a concubine, because this is a political thing, and we must weld peace out of this moment, enlist the great houses of the Landstrad. We must obey the forms. Yet that princess shall have no more of me than my name. No child of mine, nor touch, nor softness of glance, nor instant of desire. So say you now, Chani said. She glanced across the room at the tall princess. Do you know so little of my son? Jessica whispered. See that princess standing there, so haughty and confident. They say she has pretensions of a literary nature. Let us hope she finds solace in such things. She'll have little else. A bitter laugh escaped Jessica. This is Paul's mother. Think on it, Chani. That princess will have the name, yet she'll live as less than a concubine. Never to know a moment of tenderness from the man to whom she's bound. While we, Chani, we who carry the name of concubine, history will call... Again. Sorry, okay. History will call us wives.
And no
And
need for anything further. Curtain drop. Anyway, enjoy the appendix.
Enjoy the first 4 appendices. Oh,
but yeah, no, it's just like he's like Frank Herbert's like, how do I close this loop? And it's just like Paul's like, listen, I'm gonna marry her, but I am not gonna fuck her. And she's like, I don't know, she's pretty hot. And then his
she's
mom
standing
is like,
right there.
Yeah. And his mom's like, listen, trust me, my son is not gonna fuck that bitch. He has no interest.
So what?
He is going to become a historian because she's getting fucked so little.
So why do you think Frank Herbert was so insistent with like Lady Jessica and then Chani, the like primary female characters in this novel? Like, why was he so insistent on them being concubines?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I don't have a good answer. I don't have a clear answer. Like the simplest answer is probably that Frank Herbert is insane, right? But to try for like a more interesting angle, and this isn't fully thought out, right? But like, again, this is someone who's writing kind of like mixed up in the 60s counterculture, like is interested in alternative kinds of organizations, including ways of organizing relationships, maybe. And, is maybe trying to be critical even of maybe like the nuclear family, maybe trying to be critical of feminized domesticity even, but also like is such just like a dumb dude that like his solution to that, like it's a very like dude's idea of women's liberation, right? It's like, listen, you're gonna be a concubine, but you're gonna be the best fucking concubine. You're gonna have all the sex, and like you're gonna have magical powers. Like it rules, right? But like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, probably similar to what you're saying. This kind of imagination that it's almost a liberatory stance towards like the nature of women versus men, and like what this might look like in the future. And but again, like it rests on this premise of like, no, you don't need to be his wife. He will have a wife, but fuck that. Fuck her. She's gonna have hope she likes writing books.
Yeah.
So like the only like the liberation of women is dependent upon like fucking over other women, I guess.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Is how it
and
works
like,
out.
Even to the extent that there is any kind of like empowered women characters in this novel, right? Like the novel is also like constantly insisting upon Paul's exceptionality, right? And that is like directly tied to gender. It's not even something we need to like, even if it wasn't, we could still easily pick it out of the text. But like the text literally says things like so like early in the film, he does this like weird test where basically like he puts his hand in this box that causes his hand to like feel incredible amounts of pain. But the Reverend Mother is holding like a poison needle against his neck, right? And the idea is like if he pulls the hand out to not feel the pain anymore, that she will prick him with, it's called the Gom Jabbar, and he will die. So it's like, it's this very like, and Herbert is obsessed with this kind of idea, this like man rising above his animal nature, right? It's like an animal, right, couldn't overcome its instincts and would recede from the pain. Paul has reason, right? It's like some fucking John Locke bullshit. I don't know, like, and can overcome it, right? But when he's doing it, and this is like a thing that the Bene Gesserit do as well, this ritual. But she literally says, like, or she thinks in her vocalized thoughts that the film does, as Paul is holding his hand in there, quote,
"No woman, child, ever withstood that much."
Right? And the idea is that sort of like Paul is basically like a male Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, and they're only
like,
supposed to be women.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like only a guy. He's only a man because Lady Jessica, his mother, didn't follow the rules. She didn't do what she's supposed to do and have a daughter. She had a son. Yeah. And go figure, he's the one who's going to be their messianic figure because he could do the things that all the ladies couldn't do. He could see through that door that they couldn't.
And so she is like this empowered figure to an extent, right? And she goes against the like centuries long eugenics program that is supposed to eventually produce the Messiah, right? And she's just like, fuck it, I want a boy. Because that's also, they have the ability to like control the sex of their offspring somehow, like the Bene Gesserit.
Well, that's the future. That's fine.
But that agency that she has, its only affordance is producing a male character who then like basically, has this like gendered cheat code to like really do awesome magic. Yeah. Like, you know, women can just do kind of lame magic. Like they can make a guy like kill his friend or whatever and crash the plane. But like Paul can enter into this space that was like foreclosed, right? And it relies upon a religiously like transcendent idea of gender as well, right? This is not like a socially constructed idea of gender, right? Because it's like, no, like the fact that this person has like the XY chromosomes somehow has this like philosophical significance, right? Like in some ways, like what Paul is, it's like he's incredibly powerful, but he's also kind of terrifying, right? Like, and the novel, like, and the film both racialize him and his movement, right? He's explicitly referred to as jihad, right? Mm-hmm. What he's doing, right? And then in the novel, especially, like there are these projected visions of like, Paul has these visions of like not being able to control the like revolution he's starting and it eventually like taking over the entire universe, right? Yeah. And which I'm not saying would be a bad thing, right? But like Herbert seems to think that it's like kind of a bad thing, maybe to me. Like it's like not even Paul, his like incredible super wunderkind, can't control this like orientalized, scary, outside of society people. So like, I guess my question for you is like, where does like either the novel or the film like land on this like this act that Jessica makes to bring about Paul? Like, because it's kind of, I can't quite decide, like, is it saying like, oh, Jessica was a badass and she did what had to be done and she brought about the Messiah, or is she saying like she fucked with the plan and now we've unleashed something we can't control?
So I think the film is very much the former. The film literally ends with, I think it's the sister Aaliyah saying,
"And how can this be? For he is the Kwisatz Haderach."
It's like, oh yeah, he's the space Jesus. It's like,
and
that's
the rain
very
coming down,
yeah. Whereas the book does a lot more of like, even throughout the early chapters, Paul is talking about, he has this notion of his, what he calls his terrible purpose, and that is much more ominous. And he's trying to figure out like, what is my terrible purpose? Am I going to become a mentat? Am I going to become, one of these like future spy human computer things? Like, what am I going to do? It turns out his terrible purpose is this jihad, which unleashes, death and destruction upon the entire universe and remakes the universe through that act. I think the book is much more, you even get a sense towards the end of the book that he starts to like not fall into this like caring about people sort of trait that House Atreides had, perhaps to a fault, focused on in the first half. So he starts to like almost ascend beyond this plane of caring about people and just like caring about his purpose in the grander narrative of history, and not caring about how many people he's going to roll over to make that purpose a reality.
Yeah, no, I think I agree, right? Like the ending of the film, right, is very much, it's this transcendent moment, right? And like, we should mention the band Toto did the music for this film, which fucking rules, by the way. And I mean rules with all the force of being very bad. like it fucking sucks ass, but in a way that really rules.
It's unrepentant in like, it goes all in. It's like, oh shit, there's that guitar lick. Like they go all in on it.
And we do need to at some point like have like a mini symposium on this podcast about like, why is the guitar like such a fundamentally anti-cinematic instrument, right? The electric guitar specifically, right? Like there's a couple examples I can think of, like, like Neil Young's Dead Man soundtrack, but whenever you've got like a like raucous, like distorted guitar solo, it's like cinema dies in that moment, right? but right, like Toto's doing the music for this. And the ending is like, it's I bless the rains down in Arrakis, right? It's just like the rain's coming and this is good. We don't get any of the visions of what happens next, right? And the novel is plagued by those visions. And the decision by the film to exclude them, I mean, we could critique it as just like, oh, it's missing the point of the novel, but like the film's clearly trying to do something different, right? Like,
right.
And I think it has something to do, because I'm like thinking about like Lynch is such a filmmaker who is very invested in the fact that he's making films, right? Like he's never, and obviously like sci-fi is not realism, but like there's a way of making a sci-fi film where you're just like invested in the world, right? And you're in the world in the world's terms. I don't think Lynch is doing that in this film. Like a lot of people have critiqued like the special effects in the film are like kind of ludicrous, right? But like David Lynch's special effects are always like intentionally bad, right? He's trying to draw attention to the fact that what you're watching is constructed. He's always doing this. Like Blue Velvet ends with this shot of a bird on a tree branch outside a window, and it's supposed to be like, oh, after all this horrible stuff, we've restored or suburban order. And like the characters are looking and they have no trickle of irony. They're just like, look at the bird. It's beautiful. The robins are coming back. But like the robin is obviously not real. Like, and it would be very trivial for him to get footage of a robin. Like, it's not like it was some impossible thing. It was probably harder to make this weird, like puppet robin, right? He's very interested in drawing our attention to that we're watching images. And so I think he doesn't want to give us the tells that the novels are doing. Like, he wants us to end with this like almost like religious euphoria, but that is almost like it's so much what it is that it almost loops back into being terrifying as an image itself, right? But like, if he gave us the wink that that's what we're supposed to think, I think like the spell would be broken, right? But I at least in my wanting to defend Lynch as a filmmaker, that's where I'm going. I don't know if you buy that.
Yeah, so I think this hypothetical world you've created, it sounds great. Like, because you want that moment of unsurety, especially after a film where you like, you know, the Harkonnens are such villains. Like, they're just physically portrayed to have all the archetypes, like, oh, they're ugly and they're fat and have boils. Like, they're just like made to like hit all of the check marks of like stereotypes of villainy.
Yeah, well, and they're given sort of a queered sexuality, right? In like the long tradition of the like kind of like homosexual villain, right? Like the Baron is shown like basically like raping and killing a like mannish boy or boyish man. It's like unclear which at like you know, the same time, like this is a like potentially homophobic depiction if it's not doing it in a critical way. And I think that's like an open question for me. Like, is the film playing with this filmic convention of the homophobic villain v the like hyper masculine Paul, or is it falling into those tropes? I'm not sure.
Right. I mean, because there's interesting stuff with like even in the book where the idea was that Paul was supposed to be born a girl. Like, that was the whole thing that Lady Jessica didn't go along with, and was supposed to marry Fade Routha. Like, that was the B'nai B'rith plan.
Shit.
That's what, so like there is some like weird shit happening with like how, I don't think that comes out at all in the film, but like in the book maybe there is some intentionality to thinking about that aspect. Yeah, the film. I think you have a fair point. Like, I don't know if it was more that or like Harkonnen and violence towards like young boys and like weird, gross stuff. I mean, it was made by a libertarian, so you never know with this shit.
Well, it's a way of making them they're super like other, right? They're super like dark and creepy. Like, they rip pieces off animal carcasses and stuff. And just to be clear, I'm not trying to ascribe intent to Herbert or Lynch with this stuff, right? But because it's such a like, it's pushing the absurdity of gender that we all live in, and the absurdity of sexuality and like and sexual regimes of identity that we all live in relation to such like absurd lengths in its like almost like clownification of these like gender categories. Again, I'm not trying to say like Frank Herbert has some kind of like liberatory sexual politics at all, but his sexual politics is so oppressive that like Lynch's attempt to like adapt it is necessarily like so messy it's almost interesting. Like it's like, because like it's like you can't take it seriously, but then it's the consequences of it we're consistently reminded are serious, right? So like we go from this scene that introduces us to the Baron, where he's like having this doctor cut the boils off and telling him how beautiful his face is, and it's like farcical, and he's like this almost like kind of clownish character, to again him like horribly like ripping out this, like, because like his servants all have like what they call a heart plug, so that basically the Baron can at any time pull out their heart plug and they like bleed out the chest and die while he like rapes them basically.
Man, I want to get into like the specifics of the David Lynch film, but can we just fucking talk about this cast outside of, like, I get it. You like Twin Peaks, and this has a lot of those actors in it. Cool. Yeah. Great. We've talked about that at length. But there are some other actors that someone like me, who is like a big Trekkie, it really appreciates.
Oh, there's some Star Trek people in this?
I mean, yes.
Listen,
so
buddy,
obviously
that is my biggest aporia is Star Trek. I mean, Patrick Stewart. Okay.
Yeah. So Patrick Stewart's the obvious one as Gurney Halleck.
Sorry for pointing out the obvious.
No, but also, so Dean Stockwell is in this as Wellington Yueh.
Yui.
Yeah, they always say Yui. In the book, does he have an H in the name?
Well, this is the thing. This is the problem of giving a character a vaguely Chinese name and having him played by Dean Stockwell. It opens up a lot of questions about the pronunciation.
And having the first name be Wellington.
So Wellington. I just like, man, Duncan, Idaho. Wellington Yui. Like,
yeah.
Say what you will about Frank Herbert. He was very, very hungry.
So Wellington Yui, Dean Stockwell, who he was in Star Trek Enterprise. He was in.
I know him from Battlestar.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, I think he's more well known from Battlestar Galactica, the remix.
And also Paris, Texas. One of the best movies ever.
Okay, but also you have Brad Dourif as Piter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and he had a few characters. He had a character in Star Trek Voyager. He had like a recurring character. Him physically as a character, like his eyes are very like, you get why he would play Piter, because you're like, oh shit, what's this guy think? He had a character in Babylon 5 that was a former serial killer that had his mind wiped and then became a monk, essentially. So like, he plays these sort of almost like mentally deranged characters, these kind of it's like Piter works so well for him, and this was really cool to see him like very young in that role, because I think he does a great job of being this kind of creepy like mentat character.
Yeah, and he goes on to be in Lynch's Blue Velvet. He of course had been in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest before this. Incredible performance. He's notably in Lord of the Rings. He's in Alien Resurrection. Brad Dourif's one of those like guys that's like always like popping up in these sort of like nerd culture properties, and like you're like, oh, it's that guy. And
yeah, he's great. So yeah, like the cast was stacked, and maybe not stacked at the time, but you know, looking retrospectively at it, like it is stacked.
Yeah, and you know, and I know we've talked about it, but the thing that's overwhelming about this film to me, at cast wise, it isn't just that it has a bunch of people who go on to become like kind of like regular David Lynch players. Obviously, Kyle MacLachlan, probably the actor, besides Laura Dern, the actor most associated with Lynch. We also have Everett McGill, who plays Big Ed in Twin Peaks. Jack Nance has a small role in this, who is in Twin Peaks later, but also is famously the protagonist in Eraserhead, David Lynch's first feature-length film. And then the Emperor is played by Jose Ferrer, who is the father of Miguel Ferrer, the tragically late Miguel Ferrer, who plays Albert in Twin Peaks. And it's not just that. And David Lynch is a director who's known. He's one of those directors who has like a group of actors associated with him, as many kind of like auteur directors do.
Yeah.
Although Lynch's kind of like group of players is known for being a little less famous, less maybe like good, quote unquote, at acting than some others. But what's fascinating to me is like, this is like 0.0 for so many of those people, even though this film was a colossal failure. And Lynch thought it was a colossal failure. Like, he doesn't want to talk about it anymore. He's like embarrassed about it, right? But nonetheless, all of these actors then go on to appear like throughout his filmography. He wanted to move on from Dune, but he did not want to move on from this cast. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And again, also just in terms of sci-fi in general, like, this cast goes on to be players in like multiple franchises in like sci-fi television, especially in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah, but like also we should say none of them do a particularly good job. Right? That is, if we're looking to this film to do like naturalistic acting.
Yeah.
Right. Like in like a like sort of like De Niro, Pacino school of acting, right? And this is maybe where we can start talking about this film and its like relationship to David Lynch's career a little more explicitly. Like, you know, we talked about this already to an extent, but this is it can't be overestimated how important Dune, and specifically Dune's failure as a blockbuster hit, is for David Lynch's career as a director, right? David Lynch, you know, he has his first film, Eraserhead, which is fantastic, arguably his best work, very unusual film, very, you know, indie production. And, you know, but like, and then he makes The Elephant Man. And at this point in his arc, which is very early, so Elephant Man comes out in 1980, 4 years before Dune. And Elephant Man is like probably Lynch's most acclaimed film in terms of like mainstream accolades, right? He gets a Oscar nomination for Best Director for Elephant Man, which I'm pretty sure he never replicates, despite being considered, right, one of like if you're talking to like film critics, he would be on the short list of like great directors of the second half of the 20th century, right? And at the point of Elephant Man, like Lynch is a like ascendant filmmaker, right? And he has made these sort of strange films, but like Elephant Man, I think, is like his least interesting movie in a lot of ways. It's, you know, it's in black and white. It's obviously dealing with like, you know, deformity, which is something that Lynch is very interested in some potentially in problematic ways. But he was potentially on the path towards becoming a mainstream filmmaker. And like Dune was his big blockbuster. It was his like chance to make a Star Wars. Had it been successful, who knows what he would have done, right? And you know, it sounds weird to us to imagine in retrospect, like, oh, like David Lynch, who makes all these weird artsy movies, like him being a mainstream filmmaker, that's weird. But like George Lucas offered Return of the Jedi to David Lynch.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
I mean, it's wild. Who know? Like, what would it have been, right? But it's also like maybe that then we never get the David Lynch that we think of as David Lynch. You know what I mean? Like, but so Dune is a huge failure, financially, critically as well. Lynch is disenchanted with it. He doesn't want to do these kind of movies anymore. He makes Blue Velvet, another one of his like great films in 1986, weirdly reusing Kyle MacLachlan, the kind of failed protagonist of Dune, right? And then creates this like one of the greatest films of the 20th century, Blue Velvet. But like it's a weird neo-noir kind of like indie picture. And then that's just like what he does now. And that's what he's done since. And he's this director who does these like, he's not doing like financed by the skin of your teeth movies, but he's not doing big blockbusters. He's found this kind of niche marketplace, right, for making these kind of like weirdo movies that get critical acclaim. They actually don't lose money. I think a lot of people think his films would lose money. They make money, but they aren't blockbusters. They're going to make money in Japan, in France, on certain like art house cinemas in the US, right? And then like, he brings a certain amount of prestige to whoever he's making the movie for, right? And like this is the path he goes down because of Dune's failure. And then he establishes himself as like one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, in my opinion, right? And one of the filmmakers who has probably some of the biggest, is given critically, I would say, some of the biggest like bandwidth for doing things that seem like they should be bad, right? Yeah. Like David Lynch films are famous for like having acting that seems like almost hilariously bad sometimes, or like almost intentionally bad, doing things that seem like almost designed to like piss the viewer off. Like the most recent season of Twin Peaks, The Return, which was like the comeback season, has like a scene of a guy like sweeping a floor for like 5 straight minutes. It might even be longer than that, right? Like he will do these things that like if any other filmmaker did them, they would be completely dismissed. But he's developed this cachet where he's given the credit for like, he knows what he's doing. And if he's doing it, it has to mean something, right? But then that all spins around this question of like, but what about Dune, right? Dune is kind of the thing like, that's kind of like, it's the necessary condition for David Lynch becoming that, but it's also constantly absolved, right? And then the question for me is like, knowing what we know about Lynch now for the work he's done since Dune, does that enable us to reassess Dune as a better film than it seems to be? Because if we watch it expecting it to be a blockbuster, it's horrible.
Right.
It's like unwatchable drivel. But if we watch it through the lens of being a Lynch film, and the thing is, people couldn't have done this at the time, I don't think, because there wasn't enough evidence for what a Lynch film was. There was Eraserhead, and then Elephant Man, I don't even think is a good example of a Lynch film, and then Dune. But now that we know what a Lynch film is and we know what he's doing, can we uncover something more interesting in Dune? Or is it just the mistake he had to make to go down his path of like obscure greatness?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think a related question that perhaps springs up is like, is Dune actually a good book or not? Because you have to think about the fact that like this was an adaptation, and going into the film being made in 1984, there's this idea that, this is this great piece of science fiction from the 60s. Can they do it justice? So then you can look at it through the lens of like, did he do it justice? But you can also look at it through the lens of like, was it actually that good a book? And what did he do with what he had? And I think that adds to the conversation of like how David Lynch actually adapted the novel Dune.
Exactly, right? Like there's this whole mythology around Dune that relies upon not thinking about the book too much and being like, Dune is great. We don't need to talk about that. David Lynch's Dune sucked. Jodorowsky's Dune would have been amazing. And then there's like this constantly like withheld fantasy of just like Dune is perfect and it just needs to be unlocked. And this is the thing is like, if this new one comes out and sucks, or people don't like it, or they're not happy with it because it casts some non-white people in some roles.
Yeah, and I don't want to like get off track from the David Lynch aspect, but there is this element of this book that has drawn in a lot of like fascists, because like you have this underlying theme of like, oh, well, you have the B'nai Gesserit who are trying to create this perfect specimen. It's like eugenics.
Yeah.
And you have this aspect of the Gom Jabbar where she's trying to decide like, are you a human or are you an animal? There are so many people, quote unquote, that exist in this universe that aren't really human. And so there's this like very eugenicist aspect to the book. It is something where like there's a lot of undercurrents around like purity and race and humanity that I get why fascists are into this book. And then, you know, tangentially, I get why people would be upset that the new film is going to have people of color in it.
Yeah. But I think I'm glad you brought up the fascist adoption of Dune, because to loop it back to Lynch, I think this helps explain what the Lynch film is doing that like the Jodorowsky film wouldn't have done. The Jodorowsky film was a incredibly pretentious asshole being like, I'm going to create the greatest like epic of all. I'm like Homer weaving the Iliad on my harp, right?
Yeah.
The David Lynch film's not trying to do that. And this is when I spoke before about, can we reconsider this film retrospectively? So it's like, if we consider the arc of David Lynch's career, the kind of things he's interested in. And I'm leaning here a little bit on faint memories from David McGowan's book, The Impossible David Lynch. So credit to him, great podcast, Why Theory, that he co-hosts. He's not a listener, but I hope he is someday. But David Lynch is like really interested in fantasy. And now fantasy is a genre, right? Like fantasy is a psychic phenomenon. He's interested in dreams. His films are full of people remaking reality to greater and lesser success based on their desires, right? And like his films don't feel the need to give a diegetic explanation for how that happens. It just happens because it's a film and he's giving you a constructed reality. And I think Dune is doing this too, but it's harder to see because of the confines of the adaptation and the confines of the sci-fi genre, right? But I think David Lynch's Dune is a film about the fantasy of Dune, the text. It is a film about this like idea of Dune as like holding some kind of truth for us, right? Like it's kind of status as like a religious text almost. And that's why everyone just feels like, oh, if we just get the text right and you don't corrupt it with your adaptations, which is a entirely reactionary view because it presumes there is a real text we can access and that there's a form of adaptation that isn't an interpretation, right? That casting the film with non-Black actors is somehow realism, right? Like that's a complete fiction. And like David Lynch's Dune like gives the viewer that fantasy, right? That what they want Dune to be, which is just this like, here you go, here's Paul, here's the rain, this is what you wanted, right? Like this is the image of the like the fascist leader that you want, right? And the masses see that, and they're like, no, that's not what I wanted, right? But that's the thing. That's the paradox of Dune, is that the minute you actually make it, it can no longer be the thing you imagined it to be.
I mean, yeah, no, he does a pretty good job of not having a single black actor in this film, I suppose.
I'm not saying like these are I'm not saying he's thinking of these individual things and plotting this out in some kind of pre-planned way, right? But I'm saying like I do think he's making this film as a fantasy object, right? He knows he's making an image.
Even like the Atreides uniforms look like a cross between, I don't know, like Soviet uniforms and Ghostbusters uniforms. There is a whole aesthetic to it, so I get that. Yeah,
and like the doctor that's treating the Baron Harkonnen is like this German guy with this like Dr. Mangala affect, right? And like we think throughout Lynch's career, like there are like the famous Twin Peaks symbol that a lot of people get as tattoos. That's like an owl one way and like a campfire the other way. Like, is intentionally supposed to look like a Nazi rune that like lots of white supremacists get as a tattoo. So you probably shouldn't get that tattoo, right? Like, and remember, but like within Twin Peaks, that is a symbol of the Black Lodge, which is like a source of ultimate evil, right? So like, I feel like this film to me is like like the David Lynch version. I almost feel like it's like Triumph of the Will for sci-fi nerds, right? And like they don't want it to be what it is, but like Dune, read it. It's like a fucked up book full of like eugenics and weird gender politics and threatening orientalized others, right? Like this book is full of the paranoid fantasies of like a certain sector of the United States, right?
Yeah.
And so when you put those to film, it becomes a little too hard to deny how horrifying they are. And it's easier to dismiss it as sloppy adaptation, stupid, amateurish, right? But like, I want to say that this adaptation is what the novel is. A disjointed mess full of like fucked up, phantasmatic, pseudo-fascist nonsense. And I think like in pointing that out to us, again, whether intentionally or not, Lynch is doing us more of a service than it would be to convince us that Dune is some kind of like transcendently great work that we just need to worship. Right. And by the way, and I'm not saying this to be like, don't read Dune and like, don't like Dune. I like Dune. I like reading it. But Dune is more interesting if we engage it as a flawed work and a messy work and not as with this like religious awe that these fascist white guys who want it to just be, They literally are just like mad that the images they imagined in their head when they were playing with action figures when they were 5 aren't realizable on film, right? But like Lynch is always pointing out to you, like, I can't actually give you your fantasies. I can only give you constructed images that are simulating your fantasies. And people don't like that. They want to be lulled to sleep. They want to be told, like, don't worry, baby. It's going to take a lot to drag me away from Dune. And, Lynch is saying, like, are you sure?
So given all that, there's still a whole lot of themes around this book that we haven't dug into as much. Like, for instance, like spice is a commodity and the guild as players in this fictional future that exists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really important, is the role of the Space Guild in this film. And we don't mention them much in the plot because they don't actually intercede in the plot much. But I actually think the way Lynch portrays them in this film is really important to this point I'm trying to make about like the film as like a fantasy object, right? Because like essentially all the little minutia of the plot of this film, all the dueling houses, all the like space Game of Thrones stuff is all essentially like bullshit theater that is at the outer bounds controlled by the Space Guild. Like they are actually in charge. The Emperor is a figurehead. The Space Guild shows up and tells him, this like disembodied floating pickle tells him what to do.
And the one representative at one point says, because the Emperor tries to cut him off, he's like, shut the fuck up. He goes, do not speak. Listen, you do not have more than this one chance. I represent the whole guild on this matter. Restore spice production or you will live out your life in a pain amplifier. It's like,
oh yeah,
the guild is running the show in David Lynch's interpretation of this, perhaps even more so than in that actual novel.
Yeah, and they are like, again, like they don't do things within the plot, but they police the boundaries of what the plot is, right? They're like, you can do whatever little minutia you want, Emperor, but the spice must flow. Right. Yeah. This is the famous line from this film. Right. And it's like the demands of capital. Right. Because this is an inelastic demand that Herbert's space capitalism requires. Right. Because all space travel relies on this one commodity. So it's like it's this miniaturization of a much more complex economy because you can have like this one super important object to put it around. But right. Like, I think that the way Lynch frames that highlights the degree to which what we actually see throughout the film is this kind of like fantasy of like influence, this fantasy of control, the whole fantasy of politics as being distinct from economics, right? As being separable from economics, right? Like it's all essentially bullshit. Right? Because the Space Guild is calling the shots at the end of the day. Unless, I guess, you know, you take hold of the spice as Paul tries to do, right? Like he's trying to like break out of this fantasy plot into real power and real control.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And again, I will you know, the caveat being that this aspect of ecological collapse and ecological sustainment and like being able to adapt a planet's environment to better sustain life is a big element of the book that maybe he falls flat on in this, David Lynch in this adaptation. Yeah. I will be curious going into the new film, how do they approach this aspect of the guild, this kind of corporate overlord element kind of driving the narrative from the shadows, and how do they approach the ecological aspects of the actual planet Arrakis and what's going on in terms of that. So I'll be curious about those two elements.
For sure, because I think a limit of what Lynch does, because Lynch is so invested in like exploring the internal space of like the fascist id underlying American society, that you know, there's not a lot of space to actually talk about climate change within that. Also, you know, just historically, right? Like this adaptation is made at a moment where, like, you know, I'm not saying like people were talking about climate change since like the 19th century, but it's not in the mainstream in the same way it is in now. It's not. It's so it'll be interesting to see like how you would expect that concern to maybe even be primary for this adaptation, whereas maybe sort of like the financialization of the 80s was sort of like a primary determining factor for Lynch's adaptation. Yeah.
So how many Shia LaBeoufs do you think that David Lynch's 1984 Dune warrants?
You know, I think I can't give it one score because it really depends, like, what are we talking about, right? Like, as a movie, it's like 2.5 Shia LaBeoufs. But I really think, like, as an adaptation of this novel, which I think is not the like 5 Shia LaBeouf novel people think it is, like in terms of realizing it on the screen, I'm giving it like 4 Shia LaBeoufs. I think it actually gets at more what this novel's like than what people want to accept, even if that means it being a worse film as a result.
Yeah, so I'm also going to award it 4, but this is heretical, so tell me if it is, but I'm actually not going to award it 4 Shia LaBeoufs. I'm going to award it 4 Shai Hulleds, which, as we know, is the Fremen term for sandworm, on the planet Arrakis. So it gets 4 Shai Hulleds from me. And you can make up your mind about what the conversion rate is between Shia LaBeouf and Shai Hulud, but that's where I'm leaning, because I think it does. I watched this a couple years ago after I read the book. I watched the film and I finished it. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes of my life, and I was like, so that wasn't great. But coming back and watching it a second time, you pick up on a lot more of understanding perhaps what the film was going for, and maybe not tying it down to wanting, you almost want the adaptation to be amazing because you want the book to be amazing. Mm-hmm. But, it is an adaptation of Dune, and it's a pretty faithful adaptation of Dune. And so it was trying to do a lot of stuff, and it adapted the book Dune pretty faithfully. So I think 4 is an appropriate amount of, in my case, Shai Hulleds.
Yeah. And as we always say, the Shia must flow. Thank you for listening to You're Tall, But I'm Standing in Front of You. Please find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the podcast app of your choice, and do give us a 5-star rating, or however many Shia LaBeoufs you want, specify in the comments. You can follow us on Twitter at YourTallPod, follow Ethan at Mathisipi, or follow me at Stale Cooper. If you have thoughts about what you'd like us to watch or read next, DM us on Twitter or email us at yourtallpod@gmail.com.
Father! The sleeper has awakened!